People these days increasingly complain of suffering from allergies to pollen, to cats, to dust, to certain foods like peanuts or shellfish, for example. But what exactly are allergies and why do we develop them? Well, an allergy is the body reacting to something that is trying to harm it. Sometimes the reaction is mild, sneezing or a rash perhaps, but in extreme cases it can be life-threatening. In an allergic reaction, the body is stimulated to produce histamines, which help to get rid of what is harmful. So, your eyes and nose may stream as a way of losing irritating particles, or your skin may itch in order to make you scratch it and so remove any harmful parasites. In some societies these days, allergic reactions occur without the person being in a harmful situation. However, in situations where, say, hygiene is less developed, then the body's immune system spends its early years fighting off genuine problems, and so does not tend to overreact to harmless irritants at a later stage. So, how to deal with an allergy? The first step has to be to ascertain what triggers the allergic reaction, and then to avoid contact with that allergen as far as is possible. If avoidance is impossible, antihistamines can be prescribed to minimize the symptoms experienced by the sufferer.
Now, when you get to a party, do you head for people your own age? Have you ever grumbled about entitled millennials? Have you ever rejected a haircut or a relationship or an outing because it's not age appropriate? Well, for adults, there's no such thing. All these behaviors are ageist, and we all do them. And we can't challenge bias unless we're aware of it. Nobody's born ageist, but it starts in early childhood, around the same time attitudes towards race and gender start to form, because of the negative message about late life. Those bombard us from the media and popular culture at every turn, right? Wrinkles are ugly, old people are pathetic. It's sad to be old. Look at Hollywood. A survey of recent Best Picture nominations found that only 12% of speaking or named characters were age 60 and up, and many of them were portrayed as impaired. Older people can be the most ageist of all because we've had a lifetime to internalize these messages and never thought to challenge them. I had to acknowledge it and stop colluding senior moment quips, for example. I stopped making them when it dawned on me that I lost the car keys in high school and I didn't call it a junior moment.
If you ask people what the three most important things that they carry are, across cultures and across gender and across contexts, most people will say keys, money and, if they own one, a mobile phone. The question is, why? So why are these things so important in our lives? And it turns out, from our research, that it boils down to survival. Survival for us and survival for our loved ones. So, keys provide an access to shelter and warmth, transport as well, in the US increasingly. Money is useful for buying food, sustenance, among all its other uses. And a mobile phone, it turns out, is a great recovery tool. If you prefer this kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those three objects are very good at supporting the lowest rungs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in particular, it's the mobile phone's ability to allow people to transcend space and time. And what I mean by that is, you can transcend space by simply making a voice call, right? And you can transcend time by sending a message at your convenience, and someone else can pick it up at their convenience. And this is fairly universally appreciated. It turns out, which is why we have 3 billion people plus who have been connected, and they value that connectivity.
I'm here to talk about the next big thing, because what we're finding out is that we have this capacity to report eyewitness accounts of what's going on in real time, and we're seeing this in events like Mumbai recently, where it's so much easier to report now than it is to consume it. There's so much information, what do you do? So what we find is that there's this great deal of wasted crisis information, because it's just too much information for us to actually do anything with right now. And what we're actually really concerned with is this first 3 hours. What we're looking at is the first 3 hours of how do we deal with that information that's coming in that you can't understand what is actually happening. And on the ground and around the world, people are still curious and trying to figure out what's going on, but they don't know. You see this with Twitter too. You get this information overload. So you've got a lot of information. That's great. But now what? So we think that there's something interesting we can do here. And we have a small team who's working on this. We think that we can actually create a crowdsourced filter. Take the crowd and apply them to the information. And by rating it and rating the different people who submit information, we can get refined results and weighted results so that we have a better understanding of the probability of something being true or not. And this is a kind of innovation that is, quite frankly, it's interesting that it's coming from Africa. It's coming from places that you wouldn't expect.
In the last 50 years there has been no apparent increase in personal happiness in Western nations, despite steadily growing economies in both Europe and their USA surveys have found no greater level of happiness since the 1950s, which seems strange since wealthier people generally claim to be happier than poorer people. In America, for example, more than a third of the richest group said they were very happy, while only half this number of the poorest made the same claim. Although it would be logical to expect that rising national wealth would lead to greater national happiness, this has not happened. Individually, more money does seem to increase happiness, but when everyone gets richer, no one appears to feel better. Economists have recently paid more attention to studying happiness, instead of the more traditional GDP per person. One suggestion has been that people rapidly get used to improvements, and therefore devalue them. Central heating is a good example, whereas 30 years ago it was a luxury item, today it is standard in nearly every home.
You'll recall that in last week's class I talked about how the sounds made by most animals, though sometimes complex, are different from human language. Only in humans do these sounds represent objects and events. Keep in mind that most animals can only repeat their limited utterances over and over again, while humans can say things that have never been said before. Today I want to focus on human language and how it developed. I doubt you'll be surprised when I say that the evolution of language was slow and laborious. There's some reliable evidence that language began with early humans 1.5 million years ago. Through the study of the size and shape of brain fossils, scientists have determined that early human brains, like modern brains, have a left hemisphere slightly larger than the right hemisphere. We know that in modern humans, the left hemisphere is the seat of language. We also know that early human brains had a well-developed frontal section, known as Broca's area, which coordinates the muscles of the mouth and throat. It's clear then that early humans had a speech apparatus. They could produce any sound that we can. What we don't know is whether early humans used what they had. Since scholars know virtually nothing about prehistoric speech patterns, all they can do is speculate about how language actually originated. Let me give you a brief summary of some of these theories.
I'd now like to turn to the Roman, Latin writers of the period. Their achievements in the other arts, architecture, painting and sculpture, were rather second-rate, and mostly an imitation of the Greeks. And, it's true that Latin writers also wanted to emulate the Greeks and use their writers as models, but somehow the language wouldn't allow it. What I mean to say is, the particular qualities of the Latin tongue made for the excellence of their writings, especially the poetry. For one thing, Latin is capable of great compression, that is to say, it can convey in 5 or 6 words what we would need twice the number to say. What also helped Latin writing flourish was the nature of Roman education. Whatever its faults as they would appear to us, its linguistic and literary emphasis seemed designed to produce orators and writers. A drawback of the system was that education was only available to the richer classes of society, and so Roman literature is mainly a product of those classes. This in turn meant that the subject matter was fairly limited and narrow in its social reach, though there were exceptions. I think it's something to do with the way he brings a particular intensity to language, the way that he writes poems, force or push language into moments of unexpected power and beauty and strangeness. He makes us see everyday things as strange again, and he helps us see a beauty in things one would not normally consider beautiful, like, I suppose you would think of his famous radio play and how he takes the average life of people of a little town, their petty jealousies, loves, their desires, and transforms that into something that is funny, beautiful and terribly moving.
Hello, Professor Robert. What is your topic of discussion on this forum today?
Thank you, George. Today I would like to talk about the performance of India in achieving the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. One of the striking features of MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, is that the global community came together to address the development agenda and created 8 indicators which were measurable in terms of their outcomes. In absolute numbers, some fantastic work has been accomplished by MDGs. MDGs have not only pulled a large number of people out of extreme poverty but also addressed many of the health issues like child mortality and infant mortality. In spite of all the achievements, we still need to do more. Hunger, to my mind, is violence against humanity and must be eliminated urgently. It is undignified for a nation like India to let mothers die while they give birth to a child or let our citizens defecate in the open.
Do you think that India has neglected education at the basic level?
We have not been able to achieve a desirable outcome with respect to investment in primary education. There is an urgent need to think about improving the quality of education at the primary level, and merely achieving 100% primary school enrollment is not sufficient.
How are girls and women integral to India's development?
I am a very strong proponent of rights and well-being of the girl child and women. It's a very harsh reality that women carry out 60% of work burden but only own 1% of the property. If you educate a girl child, she will educate her entire family. Educating girl child has a multiplier effect on society.
So, the first concept and the easiest way, I think, to understand black holes is the concept of the escape velocity. This is a piece of high school physics. Some of you may have encountered it before. And it just means how fast you have to go to escape from the gravitational field given of object. If you go outside and you shoot up a rocket ship or something like that, how fast do you have to shoot it that it doesn't fall back to the Earth? And so, you can define an escape velocity for the Earth, or for any other object for that matter, which is just how fast you have to go to escape its gravitational field.